Well, welcome to Feel Resilient. Who to trust with your health, your liberty, your sustainability, and your spirituality. It's my real pleasure to introduce you to my friend Teresa McCloy of the Real Life Process. Teresa is going to help us to understand first of all, what matters, and then to do what matters. And there's something that maybe like you've struggled like I have. And that is, first of all, to know what matters and then to focus deep into doing what matters. And I don't think it's possible to feel resilient, right? Really, a deep down resilience that you can move forward regardless of the storms of your life, unless you have a deep understanding of knowing what matters and then to focus on those things, doing those things that matter. So I certainly hope you enjoy our discussions on Feel Resilient.
This is another visual that I use of the real life process. We are really looking at, who are we? Who is our real self? How do we want to live that out in our day-to-day, every ordinary life? And do the work, and I often use the word called, the work that we feel that we're to be doing in the world right now. Now, that's really important because we want to live in the present day, right? So what are we to be doing right now? For you, I will even ask Steve, when I say, what's the work that you're doing right now? What would you say it is?
Well, it's interesting because when I started this process of Feel Resilient, I hired a branding expert, and I guess my passion is, and I used to use the word wellness. In fact, I have I own the trademark to wellness coach and URL to wellness coach. So I've always had that orientation of helping people to feel better, to function better, to perform better, to enjoy their lives without drugs or surgery. I mean, that's my passion. Not that drugs or surgery are at times, helpful and necessary. Once we get into my story, you'll understand why I take a palm full of drugs every day. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if it wasn't for that, medical intervention, surgery, and drugs, I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to you. But sure. At the same time, my emphasis, my whatever you might call it, is to help people without those sort of things. If we used your idea to really help them to be more of their real self without drugs or surgery. Anyway, so then the branding expert said, well, wellness is kind of passé. It's done because nobody knows anymore. Everybody says they're in the wellness business and nobody knows what wellness is anymore. In fact, the new word is resilience. And so then that's when we just looked at what's available, and that's how we came up with our brand now of Feel Resilient. Mm-hmm. So that's why, when in my practice, that's what it's about, even though my patients probably wouldn't be able to language that, nor have I had a discussion about that. So in clinically, seeing somebody one-to-one, that's my focus. But now with building Feel Resilient, make tools and resources and people, again, like I talked about earlier, who to trust with these different things, because there's so many quote unquote authorities or vested interests. Mm-hmm. I think that people are just are afraid and don't know who to trust anymore. So that's kind of a summary of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Who do we trust? Who do we look for, everybody's
and building that inner trust, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of this work that you and I both are drawn to, I think, through, spirit, body, soul, I think you say, or whatever. And I call it your real self. It's like learning to trust your inner authority, learning to trust yourself is so much of this discovering. So part of this work is taking the time to invest in you and what you think and what you feel and what you know, learning to trust your gut instinct. And we haven't done that in a long time. And we haven't, because of technology and media and all kinds of different things, we don't trust our own self. And so, but when you describe the work that you do, I think one thing I want to say right here is you have a practice. You are, you have divine spine, you have this, but you also have this bigger vision or calling, so to speak, that you feel resilient. And many people have that. They have a job, J-O-B, or a career that they're going to that is providing the resources for their family, for their thing. But then they also have this kind of vision of something, an impact that they'd like to make in the world. And so for many of us, when you look at the triangle on the left, it's about the work, the job I go to, the work. But when you flip the triangle around, it opens up the space. Actually, as you can see, when you think about the triangle flowing up, it opens the space then for the real vision, the real calling, the real like soul filling place to come out of you. The other way, it's just like, I got to go to the work so that I can provide, put food on the table. So two different types of things. So as we wrap up even where we'll go today, I want to introduce these 4 components because these are the foundation of the framework of the real life process, this life plan that can help you feel resilient. So the first one we call real life being, defining what matters to you and creating a map. And we use a word called a real life view document. And I'm going to walk Dr. Steve through this, and he's going to create his, and you're going to kind of see it live. But when you can, create a map to see where you want to go, that's part of it. So that's that first component down in the bottom of the triangle. And on our next session, I'm actually going to have Dr. Steve do a couple of pre-work things. One is we've already done his Enneagram personality. So we know that we've worked with that in the past, but he's also going to do an assessment that we have called a needs and values assessment. It's going to be a huge part of this discovering of real self. What are the things that I actually need? How I was uniquely created and designed? And what are the things that I value? And this assessment really helps you to discover that, because if in our everyday, we're doing things that don't align with what we value and what we need, we're going to feel resistance every time we go to do whatever that is that shows up on our calendar. Right. The second component we'll come into is what we call real life action. Now that I know what matters to me, what are the areas of focus I want to have in my life, what my needs and my values are, then I want to put it into action. So these middle 2 components are more around the doing part of things. And we'll talk about how to set up a project, why we call them projects and not goals. Right. And because, we have some reasons why we call them projects. How do I move forward towards what matters to me? I'll give you an example that's real life here that ties into component number 2 and number 3. Component number 3 is about time blocking, how I want to set up my calendar into certain ways and certain components within the calendar. I'm in Florida right now at a condo, and I'm only here while Dr. Steve is in cold Canada. But the only reason I'm able to be here is because about 4 years ago, one of my areas of focus in my life, which goes clear back to component number 1, is travel and recreation. I knew that was something that I wanted to do in my life. I love to travel, and I love to have hobbies that my husband and I like to do together, but we weren't doing either one of those things 4 years ago. So I had to write a statement, and we'll walk you through that in the next couple of weeks, of what I wanted my life to look like now. So back when I was 57, I started saying, what do I want it to be like in a couple of years? Well, I want it to be that we're spending 3 to 4 weeks a year in a warm climate. My husband is a farmer, so January is the time for us to go. So I had to break that down into actionable projects, small incremental things that I could do. How would we want to travel? Do we want a mobile home? Do we want to be in a condo? Do we want to fly everywhere? Do we want to drive everywhere? Those sound like, oh, no big deal. But those are decisions along the way
Right.
to make what you want a reality. The reality is, I've been here for a week. I'm coming back in a couple of weeks. I'm going to come back again sometime in February or March. I'm now living into how I wanted that area of focus of travel and recreation to look like. I also have set up my business and my lifestyle so I can work from anywhere. So all that plays into component number 2 and component number 3, built from component number 1 of what do you want it to be? What's it going to take to get there? And then the last component, real life living, is really about now, how do I sustain it? So if you look at that little graphic that I have right here, the 3 arrows that go around are the sustainability.
Oh, okay.
Sustainability, in your word, this really comes into your resilience piece. Component number 4 is, how do I live with rhythms of rest, renewal, and reviewing? Those 3 R's are super important. I have to have days that I don't work. I have to have days that, in a spiritual sense, many people call it a Sabbath day or a day of rest. I have to have days where I lean into renewal. What are things that are renewing? What are hobbies or things that you like to do? You need a day a week. Maybe that's hanging out with, I think you mentioned before we started recording, grandkids and birthday parties. That's a huge part of your life, I know.
Yes, yes.
And then how do I take time on a regular basis, weekly and quarterly, to go back and review what's happened and look forward to what's ahead? So that's the sustainability. Many life plans don't give you that component. Like, okay, that was a great formula, but I don't know how I maintain it or sustain it. So I think that will set us up well, Steve, to just get an overview of what these 4 components are: real life being, real life action, real life time, putting it into our calendar, and then how do we sustain it over the long haul. That's what we're going to be diving into for several weeks. We're going to be walking Dr. Steve through it live.
Yes.
And he's going to give us his input, even through the lens of resilience into that. So
Great.
There we go.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed my discussion with Teresa McCloy from the Real Life Process, helping you understand what really matters, and then, of course, doing what matters. And I personally don't think that you can move forward effectively and really feeling resilient unless you know what matters to you, and then you focus on doing what matters to you. So again, trust that you've enjoyed that conversation and look forward to you seeing many more of these conversations going forward as we build out for you, under the umbrella of Feel Resilient, this idea of really understanding and doing what matters. See you on the next video.